Well friends, now onwards we will be talking about population policy. For students of policy in India, the ultimate interest is to know the history of national population policy, vision and strategies, and how well it has done in limiting family size in the country. But before we do that, we must have some introductory discussion on the concept of population policy itself. So, first in 3 lectures I will be talking about population policy in a general broad sense. What is population policy? What do we mean by population policy? What are various kinds of policies? And what are all the strategies at the disposal of national governments to control birth rate or death rate or whatever? Policies can be in favor of population growth or in favor of raising population growth, or they can be for limiting population growth. So, all these kinds of issues we will discuss today. Now, this module consists of 3 lectures on policy at a broad general level, and it focuses on the subject of policy as such. It shows the various kinds of policies which governments in different countries have. It is not specifically on India, but it will familiarize you to various issues involved in policy making and what are all different kinds of policies in the world. It also discusses the problems the governments in different countries encounter in implementing population policy. Many of you may think that Indian government has not been successful in implementing its policy, and as we have seen while discussing population of India, that our growth rate in the last census decade was still above 2%, though as early as 1950 we started building a population policy at the national level. We have not been able to reach the satisfactory levels of total fertility or infant mortality or maternal mortality. This issue has government of India failed. Actually, implementing a policy of this kind is a complex task, and we must understand that government is just one agency to affect changes in population parameters. Population parameters are also affected by many other things. The need for population policy. Why do countries need a population policy? Mostly because population is intricately linked with development. Although when we discuss the issue of population and development, we found that there is a lack of consensus regarding whether population growth is good or bad for development and to what extent development can promote demographic transition. But these are scholarly and theoretical debates. By and large, today everybody agrees growth of population beyond a limit would hamper development, or you can at least say that in this age of planning we want to plan everything. So, good or bad, as we want to plan for development, we fix our rate of growth of national income. We also want to fix a rate of growth of population which would be most conducive to attaining the target of growth rate of national income in real terms. Therefore, the national governments may want to examine population dynamics, fertility, mortality, migration, mobility, marriage with reference to development goals and identify problems and take a corrective action. That is why governments need a population policy. This results in policy. Here the term population policy refers to statements of states' understanding. Here state is important. Population policy in a country always refers to states' understanding, government's understanding of population trends, their causes and consequences, whether population trends are acceptable or they need to be checked, whether growth rate of population needs to be increased or decreased, what are the causes of high or low growth rates of population, and what are various consequences, socio-economic, political, religious, spatial, regional. Sometimes regional consequences of population trends may be perceived to be important. And what are the measures to interfere in population trends to achieve the intended goals. Now, today if you make a survey of policies of different countries, you will find that most governments have a clearly stated policy on population. Developed countries, less developed countries, Asia, Africa, everywhere. Now, countries have a clearly stated policy, means governments or state has a clearly stated policy on population, but there are some countries which have only a broad understanding. Trends are acceptable or they need to be checked, whether growth rate of population needs to be increased or decreased to attain in the field of size or growth rate of population. When we talk of population policy, it must also be clarified right in the beginning that policy is not always about reducing family size. Population policy may address any one of the following issues: size, whether we are happy with the present size of population, whether in the opinion of government we should have more population or we should have less population. Sometimes some governments may feel that they should have more population, some feel that no, they should have less population, or they are broadly satisfied with the existing size of population. Then growth rate, at what rate is population growing? Size is one thing, rate is another. Then regional differences, especially in large countries like India, it was the case in USSR, in countries like China, countries of continental size, the issue of regional differences in size or growth rate of population is also important. So, they may feel that some parts of the country are growing at undesirably high rate, while at the same time some other regions have a low fertility or below replacement level fertility. Now, our own country also we know that, like Kerala has reached the below replacement fertility, and Bihar and UP has the maximum fertility. So, there are regional differences. Maintain a particular size or reach a particular growth rate at the national level is one thing, and whether we are happy, whether we want to encourage them or decrease them, whether we want to promote regional differences. Sometimes some countries for some purpose may promote regional differences, while some other countries at some point of time in history may discourage regional differences. In our country, we want to discourage spatial differences in economic development and demographic factors. Then fertility rate. Sometimes some countries may have explicit targets about fertility rate, not about size of population, that this is the level of birth rate we want to reach, this is the level of total fertility we want to reach, or this is the level of gross reproduction rate or general marital fertility rate we want to reach. So, targets are expressed in terms of birth rate, general fertility rate, or marital fertility rate, or total fertility rate, or net reproduction rate. Actually, in our country, if I look back, then from time to time Government of India has assigned targets to different indicators of fertility. Initially, we expressed our target in terms of birth rate, that we want to reach a birth rate of 25 as early as possible. Then sometime this was shifted to total fertility rate. Then sometime in the 8th plan it was shifted to net reproduction rate, that we want to attain a net reproduction rate of unity. Sometime we also say that we want to attain net reproduction rate of unity separately for all the states. So, there is an element of removing regional differences in fertility. Similarly, sometimes the aim of policy is to influence mortality and reach a particular level of death rate or life expectancy, or we fix targets in terms of infant mortality rate or maternal mortality ratio, or gaps, gender gaps in infant mortality or child mortality rate. Millennium Development Goals contain specific targets about infant mortality, maternal mortality, and our 11th 5-year plan under the aegis of inclusive growth specifically talks about infant mortality, maternal mortality, and therefore, the policy, sometimes policy may focus on one of these things, sometimes the policy may focus on two or more of these things. You remember, while I was talking about Malthusian policy and Marxist policy, I mentioned one name, Hardin, Garrett Hardin, who said that the aim should be not only to reduce birth rate, but to reduce population size. He was maintaining a distinction between birth rate and population size. The result of reducing birth rate tell us one story about population dynamics. The targets in terms of size, another story. Then the issue of population momentum, you know that if we achieve the total fertility rate of 2.1 today, we will not immediately have a birth rate of 0, or our population will not immediately become stationary. So, if the purpose is to attain a lower size of population, maybe you have to do something more. You have to exercise more options, maybe sometime migration, sometime you have to look for many more things other than just reducing total fertility rate or gross reproduction rate. There are some other issues which can also be brought under the ambit of policy. International migration. Some countries have specific goals regarding international migration. Should international migration be encouraged or discouraged? Should we accept more of international migrants of certain types, say skilled, professional, or refugees, or those affected by natural devastations or climate change? What is our ethical policy? What are our state policies regarding welcoming international migrants? Or should we promote international migration? I think one day while talking about population of India, I mentioned that there is an explicit recognition in our 11th 5-year plan. We should aim at building skills among our youth, so that later on they can occupy positions in industrially advanced countries which are facing the problem of aging and which will be running short of labor force. So, that is an explicit recognition of the fact that government of India wants to encourage international out migration or emigration. We want to encourage emigration, so that our people, if skilled, can fill the gaps in labor force in the developed countries, in US, Canada, Germany, Australia, China. Some countries also have explicit policy regarding internal migration from one region to another and rural to urban areas. Should we promote rural to urban migration, or should we discourage rural to urban migration? Then age of marriage. Countries may have some policy regarding age of marriage. Today most countries apply their mind to reduce or increase age of marriage. Or regarding illegitimacy, whether a country encourages children outside wedlock or discourages them. Then social differentials in fertility or mortality or other aspects of population. In our country, we not only want to achieve a lower level of fertility and a higher life expectancy, we also want to remove gaps, social gaps in fertility or mortality, and we want that all castes, communities and regions have similar fertility levels, and both men and women have similar levels of life expectancy. Countries may also have policy regarding social class mobility or shift from agriculture to urban. We do not have an explicit policy like this, but we recognize that with economic development there will be shift of population from agricultural surplus labor to places of industrial development. Then strategies to influence the above parameters, means you need targets in terms of size, growth rate, fertility, mortality, migration, etc., and you also need to specify strategies to achieve them. Sometimes a distinction is made between formal and informal policy. Governments have often taken action on the front of population even without having a clearly stated and officially accepted population policy. For example, the government of India has had a long history of adopting measures to reduce fertility at the national and regional levels, starting from the pre-independence days. National planning committees of Congress party right from the time of pre-independence days talked about population control. I was surprised to read in Discovery of India, pages after pages, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru is discussing demographic transition in European countries. Some of these people who were aware of the complexity of population issues and demographic transition in Europe also knew that India would soon be experiencing demographic transition, and there is a need for a state to expedite the process so that we can attain a stationary level state as soon as possible. It was only in year 2000 that the Parliament approved a formal policy document on population, which was called the National Population Policy 2000. That means before this, you can say that before this we had a sort of informal policy. Informal means that ideas regarding population control were included in 5-year plans, in documents of Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. They were included in speeches and pronouncements of Prime Minister, President, senior MPs, experts, consultants. But as such, a document, what can be called a state document, supported by with the backing of Parliament, that happened in India only with National Population Policy 2000.
So, is it because of the family plan? Because
yes, yes.
India was, I think, one of the first country introduced family plan.
Yes.
1952.
Yes.
So I think, is it because of that? They're not much concerned because already these aspects are.
Because it took so much of time to create political consensus across all political parties, to give shape to a national document like population policy. Before this, it was mostly government which took initiative in this matter, and that can also be called population policy. But for the first time, Parliament agreed by consensus regarding the National Population Policy document. So, before this, central government issues formal population policy statements at least 2 times, one in 1976 during Congress rule, another in 1977 during Janata Party rule. We will talk about them. But as such, this policy was never approved earlier by the Parliament. In addition, the policy statements of different departments and the various 5-year and annual plans have shown government's commitment to check the growth rate of population. But that much of analysis was not done, that much of involvement of experts was not there, involvement of civil society activists was not there. Now, coming to whether a state wants to encourage or discourage reproduction, you have pronatal and antenatal policies. Pronatal means in favor of fertility, in favor of raising fertility, and antenatal means against fertility or fertility discouraging or fertility depressing policies. As the second half of the 20th century witnessed development of various theories linking population growth to development and environment, and both developed and developing countries have undergone significant changes in their demographic profiles, population policies largely focus on whether they encourage or discourage the prevailing reproduction rates. That is the first issue of population policy. Regarding mortality, there is no country which is pro death rate kind of, nobody wants to raise death rate. In case of mortality, there is only one policy, to increase life expectancy. But in case of fertility, there are some countries which want to raise birth rate, and there are other countries which want to depress birth rate. As far as mortality rate is concerned, everybody favors reduction in death rate and improvement in life expectancy. There the debate is how much more progress is possible. So, there is an interesting debate in demographic writings whether European countries or Japan, which have reached 82, have reached the maximum possible value of life expectancy, or is it still possible to raise it further. Some people think that it can be raised to 90, some think it can be raised to 95. So, that kind of debate is there, but nobody wants to reduce life expectancy. On migration, again there has not been a consensus, but most countries welcome those migrants who fill certain vacuum in their labor force and discourage large streams of migrants for the fear of declining cultural standards and overpopulation. If you find that there is a large flux of people from Bangladesh or from Pakistan to India, or there are certain border districts of India where you find that growth rate of population is very high, because they are border districts and lot of illegal migration is taking place from Bangladesh. You do not encourage that. Generally, that thing is taken as a weakness of the state. That state in India has been unsuccessful in preventing illegal migration of people from Bangladesh. We don't, no country unnecessarily, no country today welcomes large streams of migrants. But yes, if there are certain types of migrants, professionals, engineers, doctors, skilled people who can contribute to your national economy, or because there is a shortage of that kind of people in your economy, so you welcome them, and this applies to all countries. Now, on the basis of policy, you can sometimes it is customary to divide all countries into three categories. Countries having no explicit policy, means they may have some informal policy, their president or prime minister or concerned minister may say something in favor of or against policy, but there is no policy in the sense that state has not come up with a policy document with the consensus of the parliament or such kinds of political institutions. More than half of the countries of Latin America, Caribbean in 2007, several African countries thought that their growth rate was satisfactory, though their number is declining. Means when I was surveying this, I could get data on population policies around 2007, and I found that nearly half of the countries of Latin America are just happy. They do not want to have population policy. They neither want to encourage reproduction nor discourage reproduction. They are happy with the situation. Similarly, several African countries are happy with the situation, but the number of such countries is constantly declining. Means more and more countries are going for some kind of policy. It may be pronatal policies or it may be antenatal policy. So, that means not all countries have an officially declared population policy, and it is interesting to observe that there are countries which have high growth rate of population, but they did not deem it necessary to change the situation. So, it is not that only high growth rate countries have policy and low growth rate countries do not have a policy or have pronatal policy. There are all kinds of permutations and combinations. There are Latin American and African countries which have high growth rate of population, but they do not think it necessary to change the situation. Some of them actually want the growth rate to remain high, and the reasons are religious, political, or sometimes some others. Religious, they want to increase number of people belonging to their religion. Political, because they think that if their size increases, then at the international level, at the regional level, or at the global level, their power will also increase. Thus, those who have no policy may be satisfied with the present trends or believe that socio-economic development will change the family size in desired direction. There are many people in our country also, many experts, consultants and thought leaders who think that we do not require a policy. We know that socio-economic development will itself change the course of demographic transition in desired direction. Pronatal policy implies a policy that favors raising fertility rate, and antenatal policy that attempts to bring down fertility rates. Sometimes a distinction is also made between developed and developing countries. Candidly, the developed countries which have a declining fertility and which fear aging of population, their issues are population implosion. Our issue is population explosion. Their issue is population implosion, declining rate of growth and aging of population. And the two are connected. When fertility declines fast, at the same rate you find that median age of population is going up, or proportion of old is increasing, proportion of children is declining, and they fear it. They have legitimate fear. Imagine that if the proportion of old people goes up to 25%, 30%, then that means that a large number of their people are inactive, but at the same time burden on the economy. Health needs, in terms of money, health needs of old people are more, and they are not contributing anything. So, from the national or macro developmental perspective, this is a burden. You are wasting money on old people and just making them survive. It is doubtful whether they themselves are enjoying their life, but you are just spending money on their survival and they are not contributing to, their contribution to gross domestic product is nil. And you do not have sufficient number of youthful people who can contribute to national income by way of their skills, new thinking, creative mind, intellect, adventurous nature, desire to do something novel and new. So, they favor pronatal policy. Developing countries on the other hand favor the opposite. This pronatal policy, some people favor pronatal policy because they are afraid of declining size of population. Some favor pronatal policy because of its positive impact on the age distribution of population. In some early issues of Population and Development Review, Nathan Kifitz has developed some models relating growth rate of population to things like waiting time for promotion. You know that in offices, in private sector, public sector, people work at different levels in hierarchy. And Nathan Kifitz could show that there is a relationship between growth rate of population and the time one takes to get promoted. In the developed country, these kinds of issues have become more important. So, it is not only for the fear of decline of population, but because of growth rates close connection with quality of life, promotion and related issues. Then other issues are in the developed countries, other issues are HIV/AIDS and size of working population, international migration and need to protect migrants, human rights, civil rights, that migrants are the most vulnerable sections of society and state must provide them protection, and state must initiate policies for getting them assimilated and acculturated or adapted in the new atmosphere. Also to protect women and children from violence, discrimination and trafficking. So, these are the issues of developed countries. If you read material on developed countries, population related material, rights related material, you find that they are concerned about declining population, about aging, about HIV AIDS, gays, because HIV in developed countries is associated with MSM. So, MSM behavior, international migration, and need, on the one hand they want to restrict migration, some countries want to restrict migration, some countries discourage migration in the sense like you go to Germany, they welcome you for your contribution to labor, but they will not give you citizenship. So, ironically they want to do two things. One, take the advantage of migration, and on the other hand they think that migrants being a vulnerable community, their interests must be protected. So, discouraging or limiting or using, exploiting migration and protecting migrants' interests, both the things they are concerned about, and women and children. This is a big problem in developed countries. Discrimination against girl child, especially in the context of migrants, and trafficking of children and women. In developing countries, on the other hand, like ours, we have population explosion. So, if developed countries have implosion, we have explosion, which started in much of 1960s and 70s, and because we fear adverse effects of population on savings, on capital formation, on culture and on society, and most of them have antenatal policies. Most of the less developed countries which have policy, officially stated policy, they have antenatal policy. Other issues are spatial distribution in developing countries. As in developed countries, issues are HIV, child rights, women's rights, trafficking, aging. In the context of less developed countries, the issues are spatial distribution, IMR, MMR, low life expectancy. Some of the countries like Afghanistan still have life expectancy of around 40, then size of working population, adolescent fertility and HIV AIDS. Some of the African countries are also, actually all countries are worried about HIV AIDS. The prevalence rates may be high or low. In some African countries, prevalence rate of HIV has already reached more than 23%. In our country, it is only 0.30. But looking at the nature of the epidemic, we are as much worried as the African countries, and you have National AIDS Control Organization, and lot of money is being spent on curtailing or fighting the HIV epidemic. Now, the policy statement, what should policy statements include? The policy statements usually would include discussion of the present demographic scenario, what the situation is. All policies, even your 5-year plans, annual plans, your policies of different ministries. Whenever we talk of policy, the starting point of the policy is the discussion of the present demographic scenario. Then their implications for development. Then a statement of a preferred demographic scenario. Where do we want to reach? Commensurate with the short term and long term development goals of the country. So, like short term goal may be to reduce total fertility rate to a certain level or net reproduction rate to a certain level, and the long term goal may be to achieve a stationary state of population, stabilization of population. These are two different things, achieving a net reproduction rate of something and stationarity of population. These are two different things, because stationarity of population will depend not only on fertility, but also on mortality trends, life expectancy and on the age distribution of population momentum. Then strategies to materialize the preferred demographic scenario, often combined with time bound targets. What do you want to achieve? How do you want to achieve this? And should you have target approach or target free approach? In our country we have seen both. Initially we had a target free approach, then we had a target approach, and because of certain reasons we will discuss when we discuss national population policy, we have again come back to some kind of target free approach, and then we calculate how much money, time, manpower is required to achieve the targets. Policy, to be a national policy, the policy statement is issued with the approval of the head of the state and is not simply a statement of goals of its intellectuals, academicians, political parties or one particular department of government. That is why we say that Congress, policy statement, the first population policy statement issued by Dr. Karan Singh may not be taken as the formal policy of government of India. The policy statement has to be signed by the head of the state. Who are the participants in population policy? In democratic states, states cannot ignore the wishes of general public. Now you see, in a democratic country, most countries are now democratic. They claim or profess to be democratic. So state must be sensitive to thought of different fragments, segments of population, different types of leaders, and therefore one can say that there are several participants in making of population policy: political leaders, religious groups, ethnic groups, feminist factions and women's groups, an important social collective actor today, non-government organizations in general, then census and survey organizations, international agencies, WHO, Population Council, which influence the national population policies, and international conferences on population. International conferences have played a big role. Political leaders play a critical role because they are responsible for developing the statements of vision and mission. Yet they cannot ignore popular sentiments on contraception and abortion, views of religious groups, their doctrines, ethnic communities, identities, and national and international NGOs. In plural societies, religious leaders can influence the policy in a significant manner. In our country, religious leaders do play a role in shaping policy. They are powerful people, they wield powerful influence on the community, and they may think that by declaring policy, government is intruding in their religious matters. Sometimes that kind of fear is also there. The fear may be that the state is indirectly intruding in their religious matters. The state wants to influence the relative share of that religious community in the overall population of the country. In some countries like Bangladesh and Malaysia, government has been able to get support of the religious leaders in population control. When in India we say that Muslim leaders are not supportive, often we attribute that to Islam, but it has nothing to do with Islam. In your neighboring country Bangladesh, ulama are actively cooperating with the state in promoting their anti-natal population policy and propagating views in favor of family planning. The religious leaders may support the idea of family planning or emphasize certain methods like condoms or even sterilization. In Bangladesh, Muslim religious leaders have not only permitted condoms, but they are also actively campaigning for sterilization, which at the moment is unthinkable in India. So these are ideas, and ideas have to be generated or the religious leaders on their own, depending on their socio-economic composition and political situation of the country, can play an active role. Then consensus building, this is a serious issue, that when religious leaders are involved in plural societies, there are risks. Suppose the government manage support from one specific clerical group, this may boomerang, and in place of affecting or influencing the ideas of that religious community, that religious leader himself may get isolated. There is not one school in any religious community. So, if one leader of a religion says something which is not liked by others, then the leader gets isolated and the program boomerangs. In that case, whatever was achieved through secular appeals may be lost to communal frenzy. Secular appeals through media and neutral and respected persons may be more effective than involvement of religious leaders. Yet, if it is possible to have a broad consensus in the community, nothing like that. Then women's group. In the late 20th century, women's groups have become a major civil society actor, exerting influence on population policy. They have raised issues about women's autonomy, contraception and abortion. Feminist groups have supported the idea of birth control as it empowers them to decide how many children they should have and whether they should produce children or work. One great advantage of demographic transition for women is that now women have more time to participate in economic, social and cultural life. Earlier from 15 to 45, at least from 15 to 40, women were always busy producing and taking care of babies. But today, among the educated people who produce 1 or 2 children, reproduction usually ends at 28 or 29. So, after 28, what will women do? So, women can participate in work, they can join politics, they can go for work, they can take up social service, and this way this demographic transition empowers them, and that is why this is welcomed by women's group. Yet they have raised objections to a few family planning methods. Sometimes women's groups are supportive of population policy as such, but they are against certain specific methods like female sterilization. They ask why in India most couples are going for female sterilization. Does it not speak of gendered hierarchy or patrifocality or patriarchy? They may say that male sterilization, which is much simpler, should be rather than female sterilization promoted. Abortion. There are women's groups against abortion, emergency pills, injections on health ground that there are side effects, and if they discover that on medical grounds there are side effects of certain methods, they may support your population policy as such, but they may oppose certain specific methods on health grounds or social grounds. According to them, several family planning methods such as Depo-Provera have been introduced in the program without examining their adverse health impacts, and some of them who reject abortion on moral grounds say that abortion works to the advantage of the exploitative male and not for the female. It makes the male free from all financial, legal or social obligations associated with childbirth by eliminating the possibility of birth. Families maintain that the males have made the females a perpetual and reusable sex object. Families have also viewed seriously that due to patriarchy, if families decide to go for sterilization, they go for female sterilization rather than male sterilization, though the latter is much simpler and safer than the former method. Then there are NGOs. NGOs also play a role in policy making because NGOs generate public opinion. NGOs are helping in a big way in implementation of development programs, including family planning program under public-private partnership. Public-private partnership has become a new concept of promoting development, in which the state assists certain private parties or NGOs either to take up new development activities or to implement government's program. NGOs can also provide independent feedback on program implementation through operations research. NGOs like Population Council, Center for Women's Research, PRIA, ORG, there are so many operation research centers, WIMERS, MODE, MARC. These NGOs are constantly collecting information, data on implementation of population programs, and they can provide feedback on what programs are working, what programs are not working. They can give suggestions, recommendations to make changes in strategies. They can also produce innovative ideas, how a certain type of program can be developed, how to popularize condoms, how to reduce sex determination practices or feticide, female feticide. Sometimes some NGOs also provide resources. Some international NGOs give money, resources to Government of India, or share their ideas, thought resources, or their consultants and experts to run or implement population policy. NGOs are closer to local communities, and that way NGOs can also help. There are many local NGOs, sometimes NGOs and CBOs, community based organizations, which are people's organizations, and NGOs and CBOs run programs for UNICEF, for Government of India in the field of population policy and HIV and health. And because NGOs have linkages with development initiatives. Developing and implementing a policy, you need objective facts, and censuses provide useful data on. All the time we are talking about census data, so I need not repeat that. And this World Population Conference is another institution through which the world community of thought leaders has influenced policy making in developing countries. The first World Population Conference was held in Bucharest in 1974, and subsequently at gap of 10 years there have been other population conferences which influence the perceptions and ideas of politicians, bureaucrats, academicians and NGOs by raising new questions, sharing experiences, providing a platform to discuss and debate various issues, and presenting scientific analysis on population processes. Such conferences have led to paradigmatic shifts in theory of population and approaches to family planning program. It may be added that the consultants, academicians and media persons too play a role in population policy by providing data, perspectives and creating a public opinion favorable to population policy. Although in this respect NGO's role is more important than the role of experts. When I think of academicians or consultants in our country, then immediately IIPS, International Institute of Population Sciences, or Institute of Economic Growth, or various population centers located in universities of India come to my mind. And there are some people who have individually, either they were associated with these places, but because of their own individual charisma, they have influenced the policy making, like Ashish Bose. In his individual capacity, he has influenced formation of policy. And whenever Government of India wants to get some feedback, some technical advice or database, they approach these organizations, Institute of Economic Growth or IIPS or certain centers, some NGOs known for population research for their feedback. So, this is all that I wanted to, I just wanted to introduce the subject of population policy today, and I said that policy means a statement issued with the signature of the head of the state. In some countries you have pronatal policy, in some countries you have antenatal policies, and there are some countries which do not have population policy at all, but their number is declining. There are other issues of population on which some countries have policy, mortality, migration, age of marriage, and policy regarding children and women, migrants, protection of child rights, protection of rights of migrants and so on. And in the next lecture, we will talk about the various strategies that government can use to influence population parameters. If there is any question.
So one of the argument is that there is no need of a population policy because socio-economic development will lead
Yes.
to changes the family size in this area. So one of I think I don't know how far you also mentioned that majority of the more than half of the countries in the world also there is no population policy.
Hmm.
But
In Latin America.
Latin America.
And some in Africa, yes.
I don't know this how we can say that, but socio-economic development is a criteria, the precondition for this kind of. But in a country like India or
Actually, in our country also, if you carefully read this national population policy, the view seems to be emerging that you should not use coercion in population policy. You should not directly talk about limiting family size. You should only say that it is couple's own decision how many children they want to have, and those couples who want to restrict family size, they must have opportunity, they must have services. Government should provide services to such couples to limit family size. Rather, government should focus more on positive indicators of literacy, education, removing gender gaps in them, reducing infant mortality, maternal mortality. So, you find that latest documents of Government of India, of Ministry of Health or 5-year plans are full of these kinds of targets, IMR, MMR, and very little is being said in terms of targets to attain a lower value of total fertility rate. It is assumed that once you have created enabling situation by reducing IMR, MMR and by raising education, by creating better health infrastructure, that total fertility rate will itself come down. Even in state document of India, that thing is increasingly being supported, socio-economic hypothesis. Okay. Thank you. So we stop here.